Rounded to the nearest whole number, the chances of Arjun Erigaisi doing what he just did are 0%. I mean, it's comparable with the chances they gave Denis Lazovic of winning the 2023 Champions Chess Tour. Poor guy. This is a Title Tuesday event. It was played at the end of May. The late tournament, Magnus was playing. Hikaru, Arjun turns up, does something unreal, basically unprecedented, I believe. We're going to have a look at that at the end of the video, but first dive in on this truly incredible game that he played against the man himself, Magnesium Calcium, world number one. I mean, this is GOAT abuse, right? Absolute demolition job. Let's see what happened. Arjun opens with pawn d4.
I mean, d4 move, it just wouldn't even cross my mind. Very often one move is enough indicator. It's just like impossible to find d4. Absolutely impossible. Let's check if it's the main move, if it's the best move. It's second line, yeah. No, I mean, one move, clear indicator to me. I mean, it wouldn't even like cross remotely my mind, such move. I mean, even in classical game, I'm not sure. In Blitz, no chance at all. So everything is very clear to me about this game. I report, I block, and report.
Knight f6 is played in response. This is online chess. It's Title Tuesday. Magnus goes for this quirky system. Will he fianchetto the rook? I'd love it if one day a grandmaster does that just for the lols in a title tournament. No, the bishop goes today. Sanity prevails. Arjun takes the center and e6. It's like that hikaru system with the white pieces but colors reversed, right? So the bishop carries on d5. This is all standard looking stuff. We now get takes on c4 here. It opens the bishop. Don't blunder your white bishop. These guys are too good. a6, and it tells you that c5's on the way, but it stops anything coming here in the future. So queen e2 makes way for the rook, prepares e4 one day potentially. Magnus expands, kicks back this bishop, and now here comes the advance of the c pawn, fighting for central space, and black's just straight equalized after takes here. The opening's completely fine, but the two roads are diverging in the yellow wood. How to capture? Well, if you go with the pawn, you get the dynamic play. Opening the bishop, it's an isolated pawn, but your pieces start flowing. Arjun goes with the knight, also a fine move, very solid and stable. And now Magnus plays a strange looking queen maneuver, right? Why not bring the queen to c7? Or just develop a bishop, by the way, also looks a good move. Why go here? Played in the game? Well, we can only presume that he somehow didn't want it on the c file here. In some lines, the queen even bounces to a7. Okay, but the queen gets very entombed there. We're about to see some issues. Pawn b3 is played. Now bishop d6. How to defend the king here? How's your positional knowledge, right? You could go with g3. It's a playable move, but you really weaken this diagonal. Not ideal. So this is the better move. You also keep an eye on the knight jumps there. So castles was played. The bishop fianchettos. Now the seahorse is spawned. Bishop pair saved. And before Arjun can get too comfortable, Magnus pushes the juicer. Top engine line here is actually sidelining the pony, changing the structure. But that looks a bit strange. Instead, this one is played. Now at first, some people think that Arjun's despairing, setting up the pieces for the next game, but actually we're going to see he's on a knight maneuver here, headed for this powerful square, and he's actually setting a trap in this position, unbelievably. You know, what if black just carries on some standard development, saying, yeah, you can take, no worries, I've got the square covered, I'm all good, you've activated my bishops, my queen's had its eyes opened. Well, there's a problem, and it's queen g4. There's actually a double attack here on the bishop and the pawn. So let's say you save the bishop, and let's say you stay on this diagonal because you don't want knight c6 to go to fork Vegas. Then, of course, you run into these discoveries. You're getting fossilized. No good. So let's run it back. In the game, we don't see takes, but we see knight c3. It forks those two majors, therefore bishop takes, pawn takes, and now it's bishop pair, knight on c4 plus an advanced pawn here against these central knights. And why it's so interesting and dynamic here is that we're going to see whether the bishop pair wins out with a weak pawn or the extra pawn and the stability that Arjun's got. Now first, Magnus tickles. Both players having a little giggle as that one now drops back. And the problem, although Magnus has got the bishops in the initiative, is that this pawn could be critically weak and rook ac1 targets it. g6 now played, possibly hinting at e5, and you stop knight f5. Also blunts these attacks on the white squares that white could generate later. So Arjun tucks back, opens up the rook attack, now knight d5, and Magnus is begging for e4. It's actually the top move here of Sir Stock Fishington, but if you do it, you really start giving some hops. Kasparov used to say that a knight on f4 or f5, depending where you're attacking, was worth a pawn, and we can see the counterplay, the danger. So anyway, not played. Instead, we get bishop e4. And now it's so tough for Magnus because actually he should get this queen out of jail here. One of the best ways to do it is queen d8 with ideas of rotating here. If the knight ever moves, imagine takes, pawn takes, kick the knight, then the queen can hit d6, threaten some mate stuff down here. Whoops, can't draw my arrows. This was the way to go. But Magnus does this, all of those pieces in a horrible box in the corner. If you take playable, well then actually white can win the pawn basically. I'm not going to go down the whole line, takes too long, but you can legit take right now and win the pawn. But instead we see the pressure intensified. Magnus goes wrong once more with bishop d8, opening the eyes of the rook here, bouncing round towards the king. But there's a problem. Magnus has missed a move, I guess, and it's this one, knight e2. And they say the backwards knight moves are some of the hardest to spot. And simply, the pawn's dropping off the board. There's really nothing to be done here. Magnus therefore goes for some counterplay, weirding it up with pawn f5. He roars like a mighty chess lion. The bishop now takes here. You had to be careful of some discoveries. If you didn't take there, pawn recaptures, kicking the knight. And actually, it looks like black should be absolutely fine. Because what are you doing here? Your knight's attacked. So you've got to move the knight, right? Let's say you come to a3. This wasn't the game. We're in the back cave, analysis mode. Suddenly, black's winning. Look at Eval Barovic. Pawn d4 opens the bishop. And here's one sample line. Queen's leaving the board, let's say, this sort of thing. You can actually win the pawns back, but black's got the bishops, open board. Queen's gone, no issues. So, after the knight was attacked, we did not see it move. Arjun plays the brilliant rook takes on d5.
Pooh, what a move. What a move.
Well done if you spotted that one, or if you saw Agad video. Obviously I'm late to this game here, but hey ho, we got to cover these big games. Now here's the point. If the bishop captures, then check, and all that's happening is this slow motion attack. King g7, king h8, pick your poison. Let's just show this line where the knight hops, hits the rook and the f7 square. Say you cover both threats, well then you can even check here, win the rook anyway, or you can just slow motion bring in the pieces like this. It's just a massive attack, and in fact white's hardly even material down. A pawn for the rook already, the pieces are flowing, the second knight can join the attack. It's a huge initiative. So Magnus plays bishop f6, desperate to defend the king. Knight takes on c3. You've restored material because you've now got 2 pawns for the exchange. We see bishop takes. Knight recaptures here, and so this one drops back. I mean, look at that motley crew. Really struggling. Cut the board in half, and you can see why this guy is feeling naked as the day he was born. e4 is now played, and this is just some beautifully stinky crumbly cheese, ripping open the king. Magnus doesn't even take, by the way. If he does, you just simply activate the queen. Another file for white to play with. I'll stop it there. All the threats are on the way. So Magnus rook lifts. Whoops, sorry, I just changed my screen. Let me jump back here. Okay, there we go. Magnus rook lifts, and after takes, he now goes for this one. So he's pinning the pawn to the queen. So therefore, the top move is played here. Pawn f6. Now, I have absolutely no idea why it's been given the question marks. We all know it can be a very dubious move, according to our overlord and protector, Hans Feingold. But here it's top engine way to play. So I've got no idea what's going on with the chess.com annotation things, brilliancy things, whatever they're called. This is actually a good move. Magnus tries to activate with queen b5. By the way, he's playing on 2-3 seconds now. He's saying, hey, I dare you to fork me. Whoops, you just blundered a rook. Not ideal. So instead we don't see this, but this. Now the threat is renewed, and what to do? Magnus whispers rook lift. He hits the knight, but anyway it hops forward. This queen saves itself, takes, and here Magnus looks to have lost on time. What to do? You know, it's hopelessly over. Let's say the queen takes and you're still threatening to win this one, where you can hop, check, bishop takes, rook invades. Here's a sample line where you hit the rook, so no time to take the pawn. Now we could see the rook drop back and cover this threat, but here's how the game could proceed. Slowly march the f-pawn. How sadistic is that move, by the way? Just a bit of king safety. Pawn marching, what to do with all the threats, drive that king out. Queen's got to take, or else you are making another queen. And here's a sample checkmate, just to play it through for some fun, how the game could have possibly ended. So let's run back. Arjun wins that one, and not only that, he wins titled Tuesday, having entered the event late. So in 10 rounds, he picked up 10 wins, didn't even need the 11th game, clean sweeps the event therefore. Magnus was playing, Hikaru, so many of the other top players, plethora of 2700 guys. That is an absolutely outstanding performance. Really, you'd give that a 0% chance of doing it, but he was on fire with his chess that day. Hope you enjoyed this one. Have a look at the video on screen if you want to see another epic game of chess, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.